Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Singleton, and I'm the Finance and Sustainability Director here at Menzies. Obviously, ESG is becoming a term that's being used everywhere and all the time now, from the boardroom to tender documents to chats with friends down the pub. It's all around us and here to stay. This morning's presentation has been prepared to hopefully give you some insight and tips and tricks to take back to your workplace. The webinar is going to run for about 25 minutes. I'll then pass you to Terry Sutton, a consultant from one of our partner companies, to talk to you for about 5 minutes. Please include questions throughout in the chat area, and we'll also include a poll at the end if you can please complete that. So this is not a sales pitch, and it isn't a warning about the planet getting hotter. This is designed for business owners or those running businesses or in businesses to help them understand why it may make commercial sense to consider ESG and how it impacts your business, how it can help your business and ultimately grow your business. This is also aimed at SMEs, and so I'll mainly be ignoring investors and the ESG securities markets. These are the key takeaways that I hope you'll benefit from. So some tips around how to start and what to think about, an understanding of what ESG is, and including a little bit about BCORP, an insight into how it can improve your business, and an understanding of the threats to your business if we delay. So apologies, I'm sure most of you are aware of what ESG is and stands for, but let me just run through in brief detail just to make sure everyone's on the same level here. So environmental, effectively the impact on nature, and as it says there, everyone's problem now, really. I'm sure you'll even realize from, heat wave, talks about heat waves this week, etc., etc. I mean, it is all around us. Social, improving equity in people's lives, effectively. So, and as you see there, I think really since the pandemic, the fabric of society has been altered here, and progress has been exponential. And lastly, governance, obviously ethics, corporate governance, really out of the shadows now. Nothing new at all with governance, perhaps some bits around data and cyber, but everything else in there has been around a very, very long time. But as I said, ESG has allowed it to rear its head, and actually for the right reasons. So just briefly on the environmental element, as I said, impact on the planet. These three categories, effectively, ES and G, keep expanding, but to keep it basic, here are what some of the environmental piece includes. It's important to note that a full ESG review into your company will look at something called double materiality. It's a good place to mention it. This is where you look at the effect climate change is having on your business, as well as the impact your business is having on the planet, an inside out and outside in view, if you like. So as you can see there, environmental, we look at greenhouse gas emissions, air quality, water and waste management, energy management, ecological impacts, and climate impacts. Now, companies and countries talk about net zero. It's therefore relevant for me just to spend a minute talking about it. Net zero plans must be consistent for them to be official, if you like, must be consistent with the 1.5 degree temperature rise that we all hear about, and must consider the supply chain and all. Those are the official guidelines. What is also confusing is the difference between net zero and carbon neutral, terms you'll have heard all over the place, whether in the press, side of a bus, or in food packaging in your fridge. Well, net zero is reducing emissions to the lowest possible point and then removing residual emissions via greenhouse gas emissions, or removals, if you like. So decarbonisation projects are what they're officially termed as. The difference with carbon neutrality is that it allows offsetting equivalent to the total carbon footprint without that initial reduction. So in layman's terms, carbon neutral, you can call yourself carbon neutral if you just offset all of your emissions. You haven't even tried to reduce them. So this is why carbon neutrality gets so much criticism. However, don't let it put you off. Some companies actually start with that as a baseline and then work towards net zero. For me, it's all about communication with integrity and understanding what you're investing in. Be careful before considering carbon offsets is all I would say. I don't give advice on them myself, although if you're considering, come and talk to us first and we can put you in touch with the people that do. It's a bit of a wild west out there at the moment. You may hear, and I'm only going to touch on this briefly, but you may hear about when you're looking at your carbon footprint, these 3 scopes. Everyone talks about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So to put it in simple terms for you, if you hear things scope 1 is gas that's coming into your building and any petrol of owned vehicles or your fleet. 2 is basically electricity, and scope 3 is everything else, your value chain, supply chain, everything. That's why scope 3 is so large and also very, very difficult to collate. So social. Companies and countries talk about, sorry, let me skip ahead. Social. So arguably the biggest topic and the one which most people are nervous about, to be honest with you. However, if you employ people, which I'm sure most of you do, it must be considered. And most of you will be doing a lot of this already. Ultimately, culture is the word missing here, but I like to think that it encompasses all of the above. If you can get the culture right, your business will thrive, as most of you will know. It will evolve and we'll see how things have changed so much since the beginning of the pandemic. Companies' reputations can be brought down in a matter of minutes via social media. The obvious example here is Brewdog. Just Google the story if you're interested. Just think, without our people, what is this business? You know, the world is changing rapidly and businesses need to be aware. So as you can see there, just some of the areas that the social banner encompasses, things like human rights, health and safety, training, diversity and inclusion, you'll hear a lot, equity, equality, living wage, things like social mobility is something we certainly at Menzies look at quite a lot under that sort of living wage and social mobility banner, gender pay, employee engagement, staff welfare, and charity. Now, charity is an interesting one. Obviously, CSR, a lot of questions I get around what's happened to CSR. CSR was our sort of benchmark for so many years, and it's what a lot of companies talked about and put out there in the world. Now, CSR hasn't gone, but in my opinion, it's effectively been enveloped and it's been taken on and brought into ESG and under this social banner, and that's where we now disclose a lot of the charity or CSR elements are under this social banner. So I just wanted to highlight something quickly here. So there's not much to say on this slide, but a term you will hear a lot is equality and equity. So to try and be as helpful as I could this morning, a phrase that explains this very well, and if you can remember this, I think it will help you if you're not sure. A famous quote by Werner Myers. So diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to the dance, and equity is being allowed to choose the music. Now, if you apply that to the workplace, hopefully that will help you. Lastly, governance. Now, people are talking about governance like it's something new. It isn't, and everything on this slide here has been around very, very long time. The difference now is that companies are having to be more accountable and transparent. Certainly not a bad thing, I think you'll agree. Whatever size your business is, good governance is going to help. For example, even simple things such as improving financial information that isn't good enough and allowing your board to make better informed decisions. That is all good governance. Cybersecurity and monitoring data breaches is part of good governance. Good corporate governance is effectively supervising the management of a company to uphold the company's integrity, achieve more open and rigorous procedures, and ensure legal compliance. Ultimately, it should also promote good relations with stakeholders, including shareholders and employees. As you can see there, what things that we cover under our sort of governance banner, or what you should have a think about under governance. There's obviously more under there, as I talked about with data protection and cybersecurity, but overall risk management, what are your policies and procedures around that? Disclosures, transparency, executive pay. Now that one obviously is slightly more relevant for larger sort of FTSE companies, but again, it may be relevant in the business you're in. Ethics, anti-corruption, standards, values, performance management, reporting and taxation. So a lot of it is just things that have been around a very, very long time. Overall, ESG is about doing the right thing, doing good. For anyone that also hears the term sustainability knocking around, it's basically the same thing. Our approach is very much de-risking and future-proofing your business. And I want you to sort of remember that if you're sat there in a business thinking, how do I start looking at ESG? We are doing it from we want to de-risk the business and we want to future-proof it, which in turn will help the business in the long run. Environmental, social, and governance has rapidly become a key factor for businesses to adopt and embrace. We believe ESG, combined with a strong financial focus, something I'll come back onto later, will deliver results and growth for a sustainable future. With ESG at the heart of your operations, it's been proven that your business will benefit from the following. So financial performance. Companies with strong ESG strategies are more likely to attract socially and environmentally conscious investors, which can increase their access to capital, improve their financial performance over the long term. And actually, there's more, some of these further benefits also will help financially as well. Reputation. An ESG strategy can help companies build a positive reputation with customers, employees, other stakeholders. This can lead to increased loyalty, brand awareness, market share. We've all seen good examples of that recently. Reduce risks. So by focusing on ESG issues, companies can reduce risks associated with climate change, regulatory fines, labor practices, and supply chain management, and ultimately improve long-term performance by reducing that risk. Innovation. So a clear ESG strategy can drive innovation, depending on the business you're in, obviously, and help companies identify new business opportunities quite often. Data. So measurement of key metrics will help the business understand what the starting point is and will provide insight into drivers needed to achieve goals. The obvious one there, positive impact on society and the environment, but a strong ESG strategy can help companies make a positive impact by prioritizing sustainability, ethics, transparency. Companies can contribute to a more equitable and sustainable future. Customer expectations are obviously a very interesting one there, but by adopting ESG, a company can satisfy the increasing demands of consumers for businesses to act responsibly and sustainably. With ESG, a company will build stronger customer loyalty. Obviously, I'll come back to that point again because it depends whether obviously you're B2C, B2B. And obviously employees, the one that has probably I've spoken to most clients about recently, but attracting and retaining employees. Employees are increasingly looking to work for companies that align with their personal values and demonstrate a commitment to social responsibility. By prioritizing ESG and communicating and being transparent about it, a company can attract and retain top talent. So let's be honest, it's all well and good having the theory, all the benefits, but actually in the real world, the real business world, how can this help me? Well, I don't think there's a company that exists that hasn't benefited in some way from reviewing their ESG strategy. However, in the first instance, it doesn't need to be a huge undertaking, really doesn't. For me, it's worth thinking about how you'd answer these simple questions. So, what ESG information do you currently receive? What are you measuring? Are you aware of the impact ESG pressures are having on your business? Because there are bound to be some. Have you considered the internal and external pressures, threats, and opportunities? Opportunities are obviously key. What is the long-term goal for your business? And how can ESG help? And how would you define your purpose, values, culture, and strategy? So as you can see there, the questions are sort of touching on all those areas of ESG. But if you do anything or take anything away from this morning, think about how you'd answer those 5. A lot of time, actually, as well, it doesn't, we work with some clients. The first thing we can start with is something as simple as a staff survey. It can be a great way to start your ESG strategy. Now, the threats, there are threats and they will be coming. However, just because it's everywhere doesn't mean that ESG is going to kill off your business tomorrow. Okay, you can read things in the press and what's going on, but ultimately, a lot of the time, these threats are in the longer term, probably. So it's all about understanding where the threats may come from and when. For example, a common one we see is companies could start losing out on tenders because they're not measuring some of the key ESG KPIs. Think about your supply chain. Competition can also put pressure on a company to act. Staff tends to be another big driver, especially on some of the social elements. Future products and development is a big one. Commercial threats, not on there, but no business can ever sit back and assume that its business is secure. Reputation, very real, very tangible, and it can happen overnight in today's world, as we mentioned before. Organizational threats. Are your systems fit for purpose? Quite often, you may have a couple of years to act, but actually it's probably a good time to have a look at your systems now. And obviously another one missing there is moral threats. Are we doing the right things still? Obviously on the nicer side of it, but opportunities, the obvious one missing here actually is the impact on staff and future employees. Over the last 12 months, companies have struggled to recruit, and a lot of the time a focus on ESG can really help. Again, sometimes it's as simple as a staff survey to understand what you might be missing and where you might be missing an opportunity. Another thing to mention that I haven't so far is that every company is different. Every industry, sector, size even, will have very different ESG strategies, and most will be on a very different starting point. So where do we start? As I mentioned, every company is different. The markets they're in, the challenges they're facing. For example, if you're selling B2C rather than B2B, very, very different approaches here. But the underlying trend is still the same. Companies and consumers don't want to deal with companies that aren't doing the right thing. And although you may not be seeing it now, it is picking up. And every company I talk to, it is starting to come through. A strong ESG strategy really relies on challenging the status quo, if you like, and attempting to break that "we've always done it this way" mentality. Successful companies are usually those that can adapt and evolve quickly. We saw that through the pandemic. There is power in diversity and diverse thinking. Use people around your company. Talk to other stakeholders and get engagement. That's really key. Stop and take note. Can ESG help challenges that have been there for years? If you're planning on selling, for example, that will affect it, and if anything, should ramp up your efforts. I'm not going to focus on the regulations too much, but I'm happy to have a follow-up call after to discuss. But unless you're in a huge business, they're unlikely to affect you at this point. Things such as gender pay reporting may do, though, if you have over 250 staff. So I think, important place to start, take a step back, understand your business at a macro level. And although you're in this business every single day and you will know the business better than anyone else, actually standing back and think about it at this level from an ESG perspective can really help. What are your challenges? Strategy. Have you got written down purpose, values, culture? Have you communicated them? Culture is a really, really difficult one. People ban that term around all the time, but what is your culture? And as I said, something as simple as a staff survey can be very, very powerful and give you a lot of information. Where people tend to go wrong on staff surveys, interestingly, is purely how they're written and how guided the questions are and how leading they are. And actually, sometimes having a third party run them will generate different results as employees are more honest. They don't feel like those they're going to be named and shamed at the end. What's the long-term vision for the business? What are your stakeholders saying? Regulations, complex, as I said, then applying. So stakeholders are really interesting. Obviously, it's a term certainly as accountants use all the time, but maybe you've never had to sit back and consider them. Potentially, they are becoming incredibly important from an ESG point of view. B2B, supply chains are increasingly important as contracts are now resting upon proven sustainability credentials. We see that all the time. We ourselves see it every day almost. Employees, think about the recruitment and loyalty of staff. It may be that you have the best intentions to do this stuff. So tell them you're not there yet. Just do it in the right way. Investors, not relevant for all, but at some point, most owner-managed businesses, for example, will probably want to sell. Building an ESG strategy is value building. Scrutiny is only increasing in the M&A world. Competitors, what are they doing? Put your head out the window sometimes and have a look down the road. What are they doing and how does it impact my business? Where are they winning? Where are they succeeding? And that can be from an environmental point of view. It can be from a social point of view, potentially on some of the governance side. If everyone around you is starting to do it, shouldn't we at least think about it? Shareholder focus, if you like. So I'll start that again. It very much in the past it used to be a shareholder focus, and especially us as accountants, it was everything is focus, profit, shareholders. Now, the shift is very much shareholder to multiple stakeholder, including the shareholders still, obviously. So I've called it the Menzies approach. This is how I work through the clients, but in essence, it's very simple. ESG cannot be tackled in one go, and that's a fact. You need to understand materiality and that double materiality we talked about before. And also short-term versus long-term is key. You know, unless you've got a huge team there, which is very unlikely, that is ready to take on some of this stuff, it is going to take time. You need a plan, a roadmap. You know, we start with fact finding, very, very simple stuff. SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Ecosystem review is just a nice term, if you like. Measurement, implementation, and I'll come back onto the measurement piece in a second. Communication. Now, this is getting to the point when you're ready to talk to your, even if it's just your staff, about what you're doing. Get engagement, use people around you in the business, and then obviously monitoring. Who have you got in your business that can take this forward? You know, should we involve the whole business to get the buy-in you need? Yes, you probably should. Don't underestimate the barriers that may affect your business, even down to attitudes, cash flow. Cash flow is key. Everything should be considered. Be also prepared to overcome resistance, because you will get it, and get ready for some, what we like to call fizzle out, because it's going to happen. You can't manage what you can't measure, something I'll come into in a bit. Now, barriers are an interesting one. Lack of clarity. Change is often difficult. Ineffective change communication can be a barrier. Strategic shortcomings can be a barrier. Change resistant culture, you know, we see that every day. Lack of organizational buy-in, very much so. Change fatigue and lack of governance. So this is just an example, you know, this sort of roadmap, but business area. Now, that this is in this context, what we're talking about here is who would we use in the business. So does it sit with HR? Does it sit with finance? Does it sit, you know, where does it sit? Do we use external consultants? Who do we have in the business that can take this forward? Quick wins, you know, key. What are we already doing that we can actually just start communicating about? Frameworks, timelines, and hopefully the end at some point. Although, to bear in mind, ESG is something no one will ever complete. You know, you might get to a point where you're communicating nicely about it, you certainly won't complete it. So as accountants, we do like numbers and measuring things, but ultimately you can have the best intentions, but unless you establish a proper baseline of what your company does today, and with clear improvement targets and related actions, you'll never make progress towards sustainability goals. So there are many more, but to give you some examples of common KPIs to start your journey, and going back to those questions to start with, here you go. You know, I'd very much still tailor these to your company. So for example, you may swap out exec remuneration under the governance banner there for data breaches, or waste into the environmental for something like employee mileage, perhaps. So it's very tailorable. While you're in a business that's not regulated under these frameworks that exist, you know, you can tailor it to your business. However, you must consider all and communicate transparently. So many businesses are sitting back and thinking ESG is a bit of a necessary evil, something that needs to sit separately on the board agenda. I disagree, and believe that balancing profit focus with a focus on the planet and people, businesses can thrive. And we see it with clients of our own. It's important that we're not just paying lip service to these things and build them into our commercial business models. Obviously, it takes time to build this, but when I'm working with clients, I don't believe that a focus on ESG should negatively impact profit whatsoever. And if done correctly, will only help the bottom line. Now, I'm not going to mention these regulations particularly, but just to explain why I said it's complex, these are just the frameworks that exist today. So no wonder people are confused. So where do we start? Well, one you may have seen, and an obvious one, is the UN 17 SDGs, they're called, the Sustainable Development Goals. They recognize that ending poverty and other derivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and preserving our planet. Now, the reason to show you this is it does provide a good framework that you could build a strategy on, and a lot of companies do follow it. The key for me, however, is recognizing that not all of these will be applicable for your business and actually applying it properly. Again, a common theme with ESG strategies is not just to ignore and assume people understand why, but to communicate. B Corp. So I wanted to mention this quickly because comes up a huge amount now in conversations. So B Corp, what is it? What are they? So certified B Corp corporations describe themselves as businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability. And they balance profit and purpose. So basically a good ESG company. For any of you that are interested more in becoming B Corp, come and have a chat with me. We help companies go through it, but ultimately the award is controlled by something called B Lab in the US. Self-assessment process is widely acknowledged as time heavy. It takes about 6 to 9 months to actually get accredited. There are 5 areas that you need to balance in your assessment. So governance, community, workers, environment, and customers. And the applicant needs to demonstrate that it applies equal weight to all of those. The other note to make is it requires amendments to a company's articles of association, which does catch people out. And it does obviously cost. There is an annual fee. If anyone's considering it, as I said, come and talk to us. So I realize it's a big quote, but I think it's very important just to mention. And I said it'd take 25 minutes, and I'm coming up against that. Communication is key, and it needs to be done with integrity and should be done both internally and externally. Marketing is a very powerful tool, and there's no doubt that it can take blame for some of the current environmental and social issues. So the message here really is, think before you communicate. Is it legitimate? If we were to be audited, could it hold up? Are we actually doing this stuff? Greenwashing isn't a term I've used yet this morning, but it obviously gets a lot of airtime at the moment. All I can say is be careful, but also don't let it stop you. Too many companies are now showing green hush, doing the right thing, but being afraid to talk about it for fear of criticism. So a few final slides from me. Just want to go back to our roots here as accountants. How can ESG improve or impact your financial performance? So you can see there, it's ESG, people consider that it's separate from your financial performance. I believe actually it's completely knitted in together with it. And as you can see there, things like cash flow is obviously key if you need new systems, CapEx, if you're in a business that has a lot of machinery, for example, sitting on the balance sheet, do we need to actually provide for these? Are they now obsolete? Headcount, is our recruitment costs going through the roof? We need to have a look at that. Something I hear, I've overheard a lot actually, but yes is the short answer here. As it says above, it reduces risk and increases confidence in crucial stakeholders. When looking at exit plans, ESG will make your business more valuable. And lastly here, just a quick one, but risk management is key. Just think about even something as simple as your payment process in your business. It's a good example of sitting back, thinking, and looking at your governance. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Terry Sutton, Senior Carbon Mentor at Save Money Carbon, the go-to business for businesses and individuals looking to reduce energy and water. SMCC have partnered with us so that our clients can have a free 30-minute carbon mentor call. Over to Terry to explain more.
Brilliant. Thanks there, Rich. Hi, everybody. I've only got 5 minutes, so I'll keep it snappy. But really, to tell you a little bit about us, as Rich has just said, our focus really is to help businesses reduce their energy and water consumption and address their scope 1 and 2 emissions. And often it sounds really costly to address ESG. However, there is a huge opportunity for businesses to save money, to build a robust sustainability strategy just by gaining insight to some of the optimizations in the built environment and some of the efficiencies you can do. So we really specialize in helping with that energy and water audit, project installation side, and also looking functionally at the building as a whole to see if actually the interventions that are being planned to put in place are the correct one for your business, and taking consideration of things like life cycle of asset and other such sort of capital and OPEX spending that you'd be wanting to put into that big picture model, if you like. So we've got a few slides on there that I just want to take you through. The first is this really a 6-step approach that we use, which we think is quite effective and, as Rich said, is on offer for you guys. So the first point is a carbon mentor call. As Rich said, I am a carbon mentor, And really, this free call that we offer is for both of us, so we can understand a little better the challenges you have, the aspirations you have, and where you're looking to get on your journey, whether that be you just need to save costs right now because of energy price rises, or whether it's a case of actually you'd like to address your net zero strategy and how we can do that overall. Some of those other elements in that journey. So there are some key functionalities we can add into it. So the baseline report is if you don't have an understanding of your current scope 1, 2, and 3 upstream emissions, we can produce a report to at least give you a starting line as to where you're beginning from. And then that will usually provide some insights as to areas that we should be addressing from a carbon perspective. But in tandem with that, the buildings audits, which I'll show you slightly now, is really the most insightful. It's going to show you almost like a capital planning tool's worth of the projects that will move the needle, both carbon and cost saving, energy and water reduction. And then following on from those, if there is significant interest to make some of those changes, we can finance, deliver those projects, and even have some staff engagement offers to help with the S in the ESG. Sitting behind that, just underneath there, we've got different tech hubs for everything. So if you did have a specific technology you're looking at, whether it's solar, battery storage, EV, whatever it may be, we have a specialist team that deals only with that, both from consultative and delivery. So you can reach in at any point in time to get expertise. So this is a look at the output of an energy and water audit. I think you'll see some of the insights in here and how valuable they are for you. So if we move on to the next page here, this is just showing what you might gather. So our auditors would walk around your building, again, looking at functionality. We look at behavioral optimization, retrofit solutions, future solutions, and like to tie that whole vision in together to see actually where are you going in the next 10 years and how should we be thinking about that now. But you can see right here, just in the dashboard, you've got just from this audit, the potential carbon savings, P&L improvement of £500,000, potential energy savings, water savings. And below that, you can tag in that carbon baseline. So we can put our tonnage of carbon that we are currently associated with our business and look at how that needle will be moved if we enacted some of those projects. That then gives you a hierarchical look. So we'll address every touch point. So we do up to 80 touch points in the building. So we're able to look at, as it says here, lighting, hand dryers, solar, and so forth. Anything which is using any type of fuel in the business, we'll address that and give a traffic light system to show, for example, the red cross, if there's major room for improvement, if there's moderate room for improvement in the yellow, and even when you're doing well with the lighting and hand dryers. And I think that gives you a lot of insight as to where you should be focusing your efforts. And sitting behind that, and whether you do it with us or do it with another business, actually this type of insight is so valuable because it informs at an SLT level from an operational perspective, gets everybody in the room talking about where we should be going. But here you'll see that we'll comment on your infrastructure in place, whether it's being used to its optimal efficiency, and therefore whether there's optimization that can be done or behavioral changes, or ultimately if there's future efficiencies that should be looked at over time. And tying that all into project financing, all of this, you can essentially select every tool. So you can select any particular project that we've suggested on here and get a glance as to how that might look if you were funding it. So here we can see your sort of repayments versus your savings versus your current energy usage. So it gives you that financial planning tool on top of the insight into which projects will move the needle most. So you're fully informed as to where you might want to go. Yes, I think that slide is okay. So yeah, the other slide I didn't show for some reason, but nonetheless, there is a net zero methodology, which is the last slide. Hopefully you'll get that when after this. But this next part is really to talk about some of those quick wins and what you should be looking at in your business as a quick win to address it. These two are case studies you can watch after when you get the slides. The first is about a 1,000-panel solar PV job that we did, which effectively reduced the need for this company to require extra grid connection and allowed them to address the fact that they had to put in new infrastructure such as EV chargers, which is going to improve their demand. And the second here is a business that literally came just to say our energy prices have gone up 400%. We're going to have to close half of our stores unless you can help us. And we were able to reduce their energy consumption by about 63% and enable them to keep the doors open and keep business rolling. This is one for you to look after. This is that example. This example of four of the stores that we did with them. So I'll let you guys have a look at that in your own leisure. But just to let you know that actually quick wins are well worth it. And one of the main ones, which is completely overlooked, considering we're in an area with a water crisis and we're constantly washing our cars with drinking water, water is so overlooked. And right now, going back to your businesses and looking at your taps, toilets, urinals, hand dryers and the lighting within that environment can save absolute fortunes, tens of thousands, if not millions. In fact, we have one client, motor service stations, if you heard them, we did just that with them and saved them 6 billion litres of water a month and £1 million off their bottom line a year. So just on water, quite a substantial success. Here's a further infographic which you can take away just to address what might be possible for your business, and some of the on the right hand side here, it'll give you an indication of some of the potential savings you might be looking at for yourselves. So technologies that move the needle that we're seeing at the moment are the most effective for your business. Solar PV. Solar PV used to be a sort of 9 to 11 year payback, but we're seeing now anywhere up to a 1 year payback, but most commonly about a 3 to 4 year payback. It is one of the most successful ways to mitigate against high energy costs. And if you're in a premises for a long period of time, it is an absolute no-brainer with about 25 years performance guarantee. So if you haven't looked at it already, it is certainly one of the biggest things that can be done, and obviously allows you then to generate clean energy and help the grid as we go along to our own country's net zero target. Obviously, looking at this, we would design a system array. We would take you through exactly which type of panels we would put on there, but effectively it's tier 1 panels which are bankable, and we do an optimization system so each panel can effectively work at its best rather than being on a string and having to perform at the lowest performing denominator. We can take you through that in more detail if we were to help you with that. And then lastly, we really do this for everything. This is a look at your baseline. So this is a look at your energy consumption in purple overall, and the generation curve there that is possible for the solar array we put together. It just demonstrates the sort of thoughtfulness that we put into looking at that system and whether it's right for you, and giving you that insight as to what level of investment you should be putting into it and what level of generation is needed for your business to really make the best bang for your buck. Further supporting that, this will actually tie back. At this point in time, there were super deductions, but there are capital allowance benefits to that. So obviously, it will tie you back to Rich there. It'll be able to advise you on some of those. But actually, again, there are some significant savings and some funding available here and there to help support some of these interventions. EV is one of the most important ones for covering scope 1, also scope 3 if you're looking for your staff commuting. It is largely becoming a staple point of everybody's ESG strategy. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. But actually looking at it in terms of a business sense, right now, it makes absolute sense for any businesses that are going on short journeys or have an outbound vehicle that requires smaller vans or even up to sort of transit style vans. There is already things in the market here which would be halving your costs, reducing your carbon, and again, helping you in terms of your overall ESG strategy. Lastly, because I appreciate I haven't got a huge amount of time, so apologies I'm whistling through it, but EcoWise, we in turn have an item here which can help support your staff and also support what we call carbon literacy within their business. So actually, EcoWise is a platform which you can sign up to based on an app. The app is free. If you decide to do EcoWise for your business, you can enact a program of education, which is 60 sort of articles over the year, and gives you different learnings from that and different educational pieces to take that can actually earn you points against sustainable products. But the main function of that is that we start to look at where you are in your journey in terms of carbon literacy and how you can support your staff in improving that over time, and actually score that on some metrics. You get an impact statement afterwards to show not only how much carbon, energy, water, plastics and money that you save for your businesses and your employees, but actually how much they've improved in their knowledge, which we found key metrics that have shown that just by engaging with your staff, you improve your behavior at work and you support an ESG strategy's strength and its ability to be successful within your business place. This, again, you can have a look at that, but this just gives you an example of the program, what you might look like in terms of content over a over a year period, and how that might look for your staff. And there we are. So that's pretty much it from me. I'll just yeah, that's a look at the impact statement. But the last thing I wanted to just take you through is actually going back to your building. So I wanted to just give you some quick takeaways that you can go back to the building, have a look just to see if there is any efficiencies that you can address straight away. One is leaks and drafts. So ideally you'd have a thermal imaging camera in the winter, but if you don't have that, the simple just checking for wind or putting your hand in water and then feeling for sort of cold air around doors, windows and opening. It's playing the game of thermal insulation. Is the heat we're putting in staying in? Is cool air coming in and reducing that? Lighting, if you haven't done LED, it's by far and away probably the quickest thing to do, reducing up to 70, even up to 90% on your lighting. So if you haven't done it, take a look. It is a project that's well worth looking at for resilience. Thermostatic temperatures. So often we go into buildings where a boiler, for example, might have a condensing feature, but is not being used. You're not using the efficiency modes of the equipment you have in situ, just simply by not having the right set points. So taking a look at the set points and seeing whether actually we need to push that set point down to 18 degrees, or if it's a flow and return, push it down to 60 degrees to get our right condensing feature. Just a quick review of those can save absolute thousands without any investment required at all. Similarly to that, control, if you have a BMS, if you have building management system, or any sort of local control on heating temperatures or programmable control, time locks to make sure that settings for things like lighting goes off of an evening and isn't on erroneously. These again can save absolute thousands of pounds with no cost whatsoever. So I would encourage you to just go back to your buildings and just double check that some of these things are in place, and if not, they would be the first things I would suggest to address to move the needle, both cost and carbon, straight away. Brilliant. So thank you for listening to me ramble for the 5 minutes there. If there are any questions, or if you would like to book a carbon mentor call, I believe there's a link going out afterwards, and we can elaborate in a little more detail.
Brilliant. Thanks, Terry. So just to leave you guys with a few tips and tricks this morning, and hopefully a poll is popping up for you. If you could please fill it out to help us this morning. But listen, don't just start. Ultimately, don't be overwhelmed. Remember, your business is, your business inside out, and it's likely that you are doing some brilliant things already that can now be encompassed by this ESG banner. For example, CSR that we mentioned earlier, or staff benefits. As I said there, progress is ultimately better than perfection. Think about the short term, long term, very important. Get the basics right. Consider all of those stakeholders we talked about. Consider that double materiality point won't be relevant for every business, but think about it, especially if you're in a manufacturing business or sector. Don't overcomplicate your efforts, because you'll ultimately struggle, and plan before any action. Hopefully that's been useful for you this morning. Any questions? I don't think we've got any questions this morning yet. So if you've got any, I'll give you a minute. But if you could enter anything in the poll, would be useful. And other than that, thank you very much for listening this morning.